Thebes. Instructions. Compete in the search for the most precious treasures of the ancient peoples. Preparing the game. To prepare the game, the excavation counters, artifacts, and rubble are each put into a pouch of the same color. The game board contains the excavation sites on the one hand and the European cities in which the necessary knowledge can be acquired on the other. The panel on the edge represents the 52 weeks of the year. Once you've agreed on one color per player, each player gets one explorer figure, one time stone, and a chronicle in his color, as well as a set of excavation permits. Pick the 10 exhibition cards out of the stack, shuffle the remaining ones, and place the top 4 on the discard space on the board. Then divide the remaining cards into 3 decks of roughly the same height and shuffle the 5 big exhibition cards into the third one. The small exhibition cards are shuffled into the second deck. If there are only 2 players, all of the exhibition cards are shuffled into the second stack. The first deck is then stacked on top of the second one and placed next to the game board, while the third one is put to the side to begin with. It's brought into the game when all of the other cards have been used up. The overview cards should also be laid next to the game board. They show the distribution of the found pieces in the excavation sacks. If there are 2 or 4 players, you should now position the time stones of all players randomly in the starting square of the board. If there are 3 players, the stones should be placed on square 16. The black stones should be set to the year 1901 when there are 2 or 3 players, and 1902 with 4 players. One piece with the value 1 is then removed from each sack and laid onto the corresponding excavation area. Each player finally places his explorer figure onto the starting point, Warsaw. Playing the game. In Thebes, the players in their role as archaeologists start off by traveling through the great cities of Europe to acquire the knowledge required for their archaeological expeditions and to hire assistants and buy equipment. Well equipped in this way, they then set off for Egypt or Greece to dig for valuable artifacts because these earn them fame and prestige in the form of victory points. Sequence of moves. Thebes does not have to be played clockwise. The player whose time stone is farthest back on the time panel has the next turn. If there are several stones on the one square, it's the turn of the player who owns the one on the top. The starting player is therefore red because his stone is on the top. Acquisition of explorer cards. Red now has the option of taking one of the 4 explorer cards that are lying out. If, for example, he decides to take a card that he can acquire in Berlin, he has to move his explorer figure to that city. He picks up the card, places it down in front of him, and can take advantage of its benefits from now on. The time he needed to make this move is then recorded on the time panel. Because each step from one place to its neighboring place takes 1 week, Red has to invest 1 week in the journey from Warsaw to Berlin. The time he has to spend in the city to acquire the Explorer card is added to this. This time is listed on the top right-hand corner of the card. Overall, therefore, his move has cost him 5 weeks, 1 week for the journey and 4 to acquire the knowledge. His time stone is therefore placed on square 5 of the time panel. Once the card pile has been topped back up to 4, it's Blue's turn because his stone is farthest back and on the top. He decides to buy equipment in the form of a shovel in Rome. This means that the journey cost him 2 weeks. The card requires the investment of an additional 3 weeks, thus totaling 5 too. His time stone is placed on top of Red's. Excavation. Once a player believes he has enough knowledge and tools to risk entering one of the excavation areas, he can conduct a dig. The prerequisite for this is a valid excavation permit and at least one field of specialized knowledge for the area in which the dig is to take place. If he's the first player to conduct an excavation in that area, he gets the artifact on the board as a bonus. Red wants to look for artifacts in Palestine. He has a valid excavation permit for Palestine and the specialized knowledge. He therefore moves his explorer figure from Rome to Palestine, which takes 2 weeks. Because he's the first player to dig in Palestine, he gets the artifact that's lying on that part of the board. The number of counters he can take from the pouch depends on the available knowledge on the one hand and the duration of the dig on the other, which the player decides for himself. The chronicle is used here. Red has 2 fields of specialized knowledge, plus 2 pieces of knowledge acquired through tips from the locals, plus 1 piece of knowledge through the 2 assistants, plus 1 piece of general knowledge, thus totaling 6 knowledge points for the excavation site in Palestine. Red must discard the tips from the locals card immediately because it can only be used once. All of the players then turn their chronicle until the number at the top is a 6. The black numbers now indicate the number of weeks that a player can invest. The red ones indicate the number of counters that can be taken from the pouch. In our example, Red decides for an excavation period of 6 weeks, so he can take 5 counters out of the Palestine pouch. As you can see, he found 2 artifacts, 2 loads of worthless rubble, and 1 piece of general knowledge. He places the artifacts on the table in front of him. He can now use the general knowledge he's found for all other excavations. The rubble is returned to the pouch. The player then turns over his excavation permit for the area. He cannot dig here again until next year. At the end, the player's time stone is moved forward. 2 weeks for the journey from Rome to Palestine and 6 for the excavation makes a total of 8 weeks. Exhibitions. Another way of acquiring victory points is through exhibitions. When an exhibition card is turned over, it's placed in the corresponding space in field A. If other exhibition cards are already here, they're moved on in the direction of the arrow or taken out of the game. The pile with the explorer cards is filled back up. Green wants to stage an exhibition in London. As he's already there, he doesn't need any travel time. Since he has also found 2 yellow and 1 orange articles, he fulfills the requirements for the exhibition. He takes the exhibition card and places it down in front of him. He keeps the artifacts. At the end, the time required to make the move is recorded again, of course. This means that the green time stone is moved forward by 3 weeks. Exchanging cards and end of the year. Another option is to exchange the laid-out cards. This can be done in Warsaw and costs 1 week plus any incurred travel costs. The 4 explorer cards that are lying out open are placed onto the discard pile, and 4 new ones are drawn. If a player wants to make an exchange several times, it costs him 1 week more every time. Once the first deck of cards has been used up, the discard pile is mixed together with the third deck and placed down as the new card stack. If it gets used up again, the discard pile is shuffled and reused. A year ends as soon as the last time stone has been drawn over square 52. The black time stone is then put forward by 1 year, and all the excavation permits become valid again. End of game. If you find yourself in the year 1903, Square 1 may not be passed once the round has been completed. All of the players may only travel and make moves until they land on this square. The game ends then. The victory points of all players are now counted. The artifacts and exhibitions on which the points are printed are counted up here along with the Congress cards. 5 victory points are also awarded for the greatest specialized knowledge in any given area. In the event of a tie, the players involved get 3 points each. All of the books of the corresponding color are counted here. Assistance, tips from locals, and general knowledge do not count here. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game is worthy of the fame due to the most successful archaeologist. Queen Games, Connecting Generations. Additional explanations. Explorer cards. The following Explorer cards can be acquired by the players. Specialized knowledge. This knowledge relates to a specific excavation area. The card therefore brings its owner 3 points of specialized knowledge about Crete. General knowledge. This knowledge can be used for all excavation areas, which is why it takes longer to acquire it. During a dig, however, you may not use more general knowledge than specialized knowledge. Tips from the locals. This card counts for 2 points of knowledge for a specific area on a one-off basis. It is discarded after use. Assistant. If a player has 2 assistants, they permanently contribute 1 point of specialized knowledge for any excavation site. You even get 2 knowledge points for 3 assistants. The shovel works the same way as the assistant. Instead of gaining knowledge points, however, you can draw 1 or 2 extra counters during an excavation. If you only have 1 card of one kind, you can get rid of 1 assistant or 1 shovel to gain 1 item of specialized knowledge on a one-off basis, or draw 1 counter more out of the pouch. Transport cards. If you acquire an airship, you can make 1 journey of your choice without having to move the time stone, but the card must then be discarded. The car, on the other hand, permanently reduces the duration of every journey of 3 or more weeks by 1 week. Congress cards. These get you victory points at the end of the game. The number of acquired victory points increases with the rising number of Congress cards. Special excavation permits. These allow a player to dig twice a year in one area. Queen Games, Connecting Generations.